Of course, we start with a huge development in the search for chemical attack suspect Abdul Ezedi, and that's police strongly believe his body has been found in the River Thames. Let's get straight now to our national reporter, Theo Chikomba. Theo, welcome to the show, Theo. So, it was February the 9th, Theo, when the police first announced they believed that Abdul Ezedi had indeed been declared probably dead in the river. Today, it seems that actually we're moving towards the fact that he is dead and the body has been retrieved. What's the latest?
Yeah, well, we are on the scene where they believe the body that they've found is of the suspect Abdul Ezedi. We are by the Tower Millennium Pier, and at around 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, there was a Metropolitan Marine team which were passing by, and they came across the body, which they now believe is the chemical attack suspect Abdul Ezedi. They strongly believe that due to the clothes, identifiable clothes that he's wearing and the items found on him, but at the moment it's not been fully confirmed whether or not it is him. But they do say they are in touch with his family to let them know of the news. It's now 19 days on following that attack in Clapham, and police have been working all around the clock on this manhunt to establish his whereabouts. His last known whereabouts were at Chelsea Bridge just a few weeks ago on that Wednesday evening, several hours after the attack took place, and that's the last CCTV we were shown on the 9th of February on that day, when they said their main working hypothesis is that he went into the river and that he is probably dead. So now they are working to establish whether or not it is him, because of the body being in the water for some time now. They say they aren't able to use fingerprints to identify him, but will now be moving on to work with DNA investigations and dental records as well to figure out if it definitely is him, and they'll be working with a coroner to establish that fact. But they also gave an update today on the 31-year-old woman. Now we know she was associated with Ezedi, an ex-partner. She was with her 2 children on that evening on the 31st of January, and she is now better than she was in the last couple of weeks, and she's no longer sedated. But the police have said they haven't yet been able to speak to her as of yet, but she is better than she has been in the last couple of weeks. Now their investigations will continue into the next couple of weeks, and of course we'll be waiting to hear from them about the formal identification. Now, in recent weeks, there have been questions to the Metropolitan Police how and why they have not been able to find him in central London, considering there are so many CCTV cameras across the capital, and of course he did have that distinct face injury which we've been seeing in those CCTV footage of that Wednesday evening. And of course they said they're still working around the clock following all lines of inquiry, but then led to that CCTV footage on Chelsea Bridge where he was last seen. But the body found here by marine specialists is now being investigated to establish his formal identity.
Okay, Theo Chikomba, thank you for that update live at the scene at the River Thames. Now let's get reaction to that big story today, and I'm joined by Peter Kirkham, who's a former senior investigating officer with the Metropolitan Police. Peter, welcome to the show. Peter, it was on February the 9th when we last spoke. In fact, we spoke exactly when the police first announced that their leading hypothesis was that Abdul Ezedi had entered the river, and you spoke from great experience at great length about your hypothesis, and you predicted almost exactly to the day, Peter, it would be 10 or 11 days with the prevailing weather conditions that the body would most likely surface and be found. So you were right on that, but what happens next?
Well, many people might think that this is the end of the investigation. It isn't. It will shut down lots of lines of inquiry relating to tracing him once it's confirmed that it is him whose body has been found. But they'll still need to put the evidence together for the coroner's court in relation to his being deceased. And they'll also need to just make sure there are no accomplices before, at the time of, or subsequent to the attack that need to be picked up and investigated and dealt with. But it will be a much truncated investigation now compared to what it had been before.
And Peter, we spoke, we delved into your expertise about what happens in these situations, and we mapped out back then that the most likely chain of events were the flow of the river, the obstructions in the river, the speed of the current because of the time of year, of course, the temperature of the weather. All of these factors would have been in the play about where the police would have been locating their searches. As it turns out, Peter, this body surfaced because you said, didn't you, that after this length of time, gases in the body means that it's more buoyant and it floats to the surface, right?
Yes, exactly that. Initially, bodies tend to sink and be out of sight below the water surface. And in the Thames, it's just not safe or practicable to go looking for bodies below the surface unless you've got a very specific small area to do it in. But then the decomposition process takes place and gases within the body tend to then bring the body to the surface as it becomes more buoyant. And that process is somewhere between 10 days, 2 weeks, something like that. But it depends on a variety of factors, not least of which are there any obstructions that could have kept the body below the surface. When left to its own devices, it would have come to the surface. And there are untold obstructions between Chelsea Bridge and Tower Pier. 15 bridges, road rail and pedestrian with various pillars and such like. At least 24, 25 very large jetties and piers, Westminster Pier, Embankment Pier, all the places where the TfL and sightseeing boats go from. 6 or 7 very large permanently moored vessels, HMS Belfast, Tattershall Castle, 8 or 9 huge industrial sites, including a waste transfer station, a pumping station, a Thames Tideway site, and getting on for 10 or 12 built-out areas where the shoreline has been built out, mostly held up with piles driven into the bed of the foreshore, all of which provide great opportunities for a body to get caught. So something over the norm is not at all surprising.
And yet, Peter, the Thames flows inexorably and the body has moved downstream. Now the body has been recovered. We've already heard that the body is unlikely to yield any information from the fingerprints, presumably, because the skin is too bloated to give a likely reading. Is that the case? And then I'm assuming now that more reliable and methods that cannot be done away with by perishing, such as dental records, they will now come into play.
Yeah, for sure. Dental records, DNA profiling, there'll be DNA still, loads of DNA around the body. There may be operations if there've been broken bones and things like that in the medical records. So there might be something consistent with that, as you say, dental records. So they will be able to establish beyond doubt that it's him. If it is him, what happens with the skin, I don't know if you ever stayed a little too long in the bath, but your skin starts on your hands and whatever, starts to go white. And that's the beginning of the process whereby after a day or two, the whole skin will come away from the body and the prints are in the skin. So that renders fingerprints useless after a few days.
And that's because the outer skin is water can get into that and it lifts off, whereas the subcutaneous fat doesn't. And all these things are a part of the complex picture that officers will be working on. And Peter, you've worked on lots of these cases before. Presumably now this is bread and butter for the investigating police. They'll have a well-drilled set of formalities to follow.
Yeah, for sure. Putting the file together, getting all the things, all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. Getting things ready for a coroner, getting things ready for a review of the case, just to make sure there's nothing outstanding that needs to be done before it's put away. Well drilled and well practiced, and something that a relatively small number of officers will be tidying up for a relatively short period of time. the public are able to rest assured that he's not out there likely to do anything similar. His family, the victims and others, are going to be able to know that he's not going to come back for them or anything like that. And so that'll give them peace of mind. Although if he's been part of their lives, the fact of his death can be an added distress for them. And that will be something that family liaison officers are taking into account and working to minimise.